Chalk Talk is brought to you by Isolite, the emergency lighting experts. Stay educated, my friends.
Kim Kardashian once said, "White is actually one of my favorite colors. I have a white car. I love white." Well, other than her using the word colors and us having colors in the title of our Chalk Talk, there really isn't a whole lot about that pertains to today's Chalk Talk. But candidly, I couldn't pass up an opportunity to use a Kim Kardashian quote in an Isolite Chalk Talk. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're calling in from. I'm Matt Bird, Eastern Regional Manager, along with our co-host Greg Keel, Western Regional Manager. As always, Evan Ackman, who heads up our product development team, is handling the Chalk Talk here today, focusing on colors of exit signs and lights and some things we can do and some code considerations and some other updates with the product. So with that, Evan, please take it away.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us to keep up with the Kardashians here today. As Matt mentioned, we're not going to spend the whole time talking about Kim K and her various relationships. We are going to get over to a little bit of business. And as Matt said, we're going to be talking about custom colored exit signs. And the reason this topic has come up is at sort of some trade shows and in some literature, we've actually showed off a lot of custom color emergency lights and exit signs. Some people didn't actually know that we did it, and other people had some questions about the relationship to code, sort of what's available as a color. And we wanted to just take a little bit of time and talk about that today. So we'll talk about why custom colors exist, how they get applied to our products. We'll talk a little bit about what code says, what's allowed and what's not allowed. It's actually pretty straightforward, but there's a couple things that you have to keep in mind. And then at the end, if you checked your email since last Thursday, you'll know that we sent out an announcement regarding the LMIGN and its replacement with the LMIGN2. I want to just touch on that and sort of take another opportunity to describe what that change is and what that means to you. As always, this is a Chalk Talk, so you guys are muted, but please feel free to throw questions in the chat, in that Q&A feature in Zoom. We'll make sure that we don't get off this call until all questions are answered. Now, the reason why this is a topic is the industry has sort of consensed that there's only a couple of very conservative colors that are necessary as standard. And so if you look really across our product line, you're going to see white, black, brushed aluminum, and maybe a painted bronze, although even that's a little bit more rare. And at this point, it's sort of fallen out of favor. But we know from our cut sheets that you guys have probably seen and from the trade shows that maybe some of you guys have been to recently, that a lot of our products have custom color as an option. You'll find it over there in the options section or in the frame and housing color, the background colors. You'll see that all over the place. And this is different from custom graphics. This is a way to change the actual metal or plastic parts of the exit sign to match a customer request. And this can be done for a number of reasons. I think probably the most obvious is so that it blends in more with the wall. That's especially true for things like emergency lights, which we'll see here on the next slide. But for exit signs, it's also an opportunity for branding. It's an opportunity to match colors of other devices in the space. So if you've got some custom colored linear lights and you want the exit signs and all the devices to match that, we can certainly do that. And so there's a number of reasons why the preference might be for something that's not black, white, or brushed aluminum. And we can do that across our product line. And now I sort of split this up into emergency lights and exit signs. And the most obvious thing that we can do for the emergency lights is sort of deploy this kind of technology into our Genie type products, right? Because they're designed to be concealed emergency lights. So that's the MIGN2, the LTP, the LMIGN2 now, and the GNSD. So those concealed emergency lights, really the reason why this is happening in this type of product is so that these things blend into the wall. We actually make them ship from the factory with a sort of a very matte white, so they can be painted in the field, but it's probably the most common thing that we get asked to do a custom color on. And so this is a very common thing for us. If you go into like a lot of retail stores and restaurants and you look up where they have maybe sort of like dark branding colors, you'll see these things all over the place. So our concealed emergency lights, that's easy. You don't have to worry about it. We can do that. We do it all day. There's a little bit of a setup charge and a little bit of a per piece cost, but that's just really for us to buy paint and get the booth up and running. And so it's a very cost effective way to do it. And like I said, if you don't want to spend that cost, these products are actually paintable in the field. Exit signs get a little bit more interesting, and it's really, we focus on our architectural exit signs because we feel like those are in spaces where design is a little bit more important. In a dentist's office or something with an inexpensive thermoplastic exit sign, it's probably not going to be so important that it matches the color of the walls or the ceiling. But when you're talking about finished architectural spaces, that's where the exit signs may want a custom color. And a lot of people don't realize that this is an option for us. We actually offer this as standard in all of our architectural products. So ELT, DTH, TL2, LPDC, the PG, the LPX. But in all honesty, if you have a requirement for some of the other products, we would certainly be willing to do that. It's just that takes jigs and fixtures and masking for these products, which we've set up for those listed products as standard, but we haven't done for all of them because we think these are the important ones. But unlike emergency lights, which it's pretty obvious that they're still okay no matter what custom color you paint it, because the lights are still going to just turn on in an emergency, there are some things that you have to be aware of when we start talking about exit signs. And so let's split this kind of into two subcategories. The first would be the edgelit exit signs. And in those instances, you really don't have to worry about anything because changing the color doesn't actually change the relationship of the exit legend, so the EXIT, versus their background color. That background color is still going to be either clear, mirrored, or white. So the custom coloring in an edgelit exit sign doesn't really cause any sort of concern. But when you go to die cast signs like the thin line that you see there in the bottom right, you're going to have to take a little bit of extra care because that custom coloring can sort of change the relationship between that red or green legend and the background, the sort of the color that's surrounding it. And that's really where we start to get into the code. And code, as always, is UL 924. That's what we have to comply with and what we test to and get, and we put on our cut sheets for you guys. NFPA 101, which we'll talk about in the next slide, is what the sort of the building and installation has to go through. And we've talked about this before. If you remember when we talked about our DTH2 and those photoluminescent signs, we spent a lot of time talking about the observational visibility test. That's where a couple calibrated viewers stand 100 feet away from the exit sign and make sure that they can sort of tell the difference between the one that says EXIT and the one that says EXII. A lot of people think that this is where the custom color signs are going to fall apart. And that's actually not true. And the reason for that is because the observational visibility test is actually run when the lights are off. And so no matter what color you paint your exit sign, when the lights are off, that green or red legend is going to be a lot brighter than that metal mask that goes over it. And so the observational visibility test is all good. But the thing that then jumps up and bites us in the behind is that because UL recognizes that in a lot of instances, or in some instances, people don't do through their obligation and maintain those exit signs. So they care about what happens when the sign is actually broken and off, but still installed. And so in addition to the observational visibility test, there's something that they throw in there that's like a failed maintenance observational visibility test. And the way that they run this test, it's the same setup as the standard one, but they turn the sign off and they bring the lights up so that there's 30-foot candles of light. And so now you don't get the brightness of the legend to sort of give you that contrast ratio. So what that really means is that there are a couple colors that are going to be off limits for custom color die cast exit signs. It's really the dark greens and dark reds that are going to cause a problem for you there. Like a standard signal green or signal red is actually probably going to be okay because you'll pass the observational visibility test, because when it's dark, that legend is going to be lit. And when it's unlit, the legend will be darker than the sign. But if you get too close, you'll get to a point where that's really not good. And so basically the general guidance there would be to steer clear of sort of dark reds and dark greens, because that's where you're going to jump into problems. Now, as always, the inspector is going to have some discretion here, and fortunately or unfortunately, NFPA 101 has kind of a catch-all here in this section 710.1.8, where it discusses exit sign visibility. I've paraphrased it there. You can see the ellipsis, and I've highlighted it myself. But what it says is that every sign is required shall be located and of such size, distinctive color, and design that it is readily visible and shall provide contrast with decorations, interior finish, or other signs. No decorations, furnishing, or equipment that impairs visibility of the sign shall be permitted. And so you could argue that painting it is potentially decoration, and if that decoration yields a sign that's not visible, the inspector could ding you for that. And so this is really trying to prevent like bright red lights behind a red exit sign, which would impact visibility. But it could also be used for, an exit sign that has too close of a background color to the legend itself. So if you are going to do something that's like a red on red or a green on green, even if technically you'll be inside the lines on the observational visibility stuff, it's probably worth reaching out to the inspector just to make sure that they're going to be okay with the exit sign that's chosen. And if you need samples for something like that, that's something that we could pull together pretty quickly for most jobs and most colors. Now, shifting gears very quickly before we sign off here, you probably saw the email that went out last Wednesday or Thursday about we are discontinuing the LMIGN and immediately replacing it with the LMIGN2, which effectively has mostly the same spec points, looks the same, has mostly the same offerings. This is, to be frank, totally because of supply chain stuff. And so we've actually taken the opportunity, and we did this a while ago, to use the guts of our MIGN2 and the back box from that with the head and lens assembly from the LMIGN. And so bringing those two things together gives us that LMIGN2. It's not my preference generally to sort of make a family change for something like this, but the way that we represented this to UL a couple years ago, and really the fact that it doesn't perfectly match in form, fit, and function means that giving it a new family name makes a lot of sense here, just to make sure that everyone's inside the lines and we all know what we're talking about. Just a couple key differences here. The battery is going to be different. The LMIGN was lead calcium or a nickel cadmium battery. All LMIGN2 batteries are going to be nickel metal hydride. Now, again, that matches the MIGN2. That comes with a standard 90-minute runtime. Speaking of colors, we've actually added black as a standard color. In the LMIGN, we used to have black as a custom color. We've now made that a standard, so you don't have to pay extra for it. And the recessed back box is smaller and it matches that MIGN2. So we're going to start converting orders from LMIGNs to LMIGN2s. That doesn't totally solve all the problems. There's still a little bit of a backlog that we have, so that the ESDs aren't going to be like tomorrow, they'll be in a couple of weeks. If you need something more urgently, shifting to an MIGN2 is an option that we can get out a little bit faster. Otherwise, the ESD is going to start coming in from probably what you've last seen, but it's still going to be a little bit before we can totally clear that log jam. So we're sorry, we appreciate the flexibility, but that is kind of the nature of the world that we're living in right now. With that said, the spec sheets for that are already up. The website is already up. So we're going to send out all of that information as a part of this follow-up. But if you go to the website right now, you'll see the LMIGN2 there. You'll see that the LMIGN has been discontinued. You could do the comparison on the spec points. There's really not a lot of jobs where the new one, there's really no jobs where the new one won't work where the old one did. So it's not a huge deal. And then, as always, as a follow-up to this Chalk Talk, we're going to send out a video link of me giving the presentation. We'll send out the slide deck. So if you want to give it to other people within your organization, to your customers, to your family, distant relatives, you can certainly do that. And then we'll also include the price book page for the LMIGN2. Quick note, we're going to honor all pricing that has come in for the LMIGN, so you don't have to worry about that. But there are a little bit of a difference when you go and look at the pricing between the two devices. And so with that said, I'm Evan Ackman. Matt and Greg are on the line. Thank you all for joining us here today. We certainly appreciate all that you do for us. So If there's anything that you would like training or assistance on, please don't hesitate to reach out, whether that be custom colors, LMIGN2s, or anything else that we do. With that said, have a good fall, have a good rest of your day and a good rest of your week. Thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you next month.